Welcome to RoofTalk, a production of the National Roofing Contractors Association. This podcast is produced by Told You So Media, and I am your host, Crystal Ribble. These episodes help inform you on current trends and happenings within our industry. Today, we're going to talk about cyber attacks. I know, super fun. 61% of all cyber incidents occur in small and mid-sized businesses. So in this episode, you are going to learn how to protect your company from cybercrime, business interruption, and online exposure. Joining me today are Matt Torres, who is the Senior Account Executive for Acrisure Cyber Services, and Kirsten Mickelson, who is SVP Cyber Claims Practice Leader at Gallagher Bassett. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Happy to be here.
Of course. So I don't know how often people think of cyber attacks happening in a roofing company or roofing industry, but it does happen and it is prevalent. So how prevalent is this? What have you seen happen in the roofing industry in particular?
I'll take that one first, if you don't mind. So I think, cyber attacks aren't necessarily targeted to the roofing industry per se. I think what's happening is the threat actors are looking for low-hanging fruit. And you referenced earlier small to mid-sized businesses. Oftentimes, a lot of these organizations don't have the cybersecurity infrastructure or the sophistication, to prevent these kind of attacks. And so there might be an open port or some sort of open door, and the threat actors from there are able to get in. But I think also, to answer your question specifically, I would say roofing companies can be targeted because of their increased attack surface. They're oftentimes intertwined with subcontractors, with portals and with other partners that can create a way of entry for the threat actor, then to kind of pivot across platforms.
Sure.
And absolutely. And to expand upon that, even from our perspective on the security side, a lot of times industries, whether it's roofing, construction, or just similar non-IT oriented businesses, often like to think that there's no target on their back. Right? We're too small, no one's looking at us, and we're not too heavy into IT at the end of the day. But as Kirsten alluded to, they want to go for that low-hanging fish. They want to find those victims that provide the least amount of resistance for them, because at the end of the day, their victims are essentially a piggy bank for them. The victims are a mean for them to get money, to put food on their own table. And the easier it is for them to get that money, the more likelihood it is they're going to go after those businesses, especially when they're not investing in proper cybersecurity measures.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. How have you seen that change over the past 5 to 10 years? Like, has it just greatly increased because of the sophistication, the changes that they can make now to be able to get to more companies, things like that? How have you seen that change?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it a couple ways. So first, maybe way back when, 10 years ago, cyber is relatively new. These threat actors were more sophisticated, and I'd say way back when, were targeting bigger institutions like banks, government, hospitals, because those sorts of industries have very valuable PII, personally identifiable information. And so the goal was to steal it, exfiltrate it, and then sell it on the dark web. But that takes time to monetize, and it's not guaranteed that someone's going to buy it. So now the threat actors want to move quickly and they move fast. And so they're industry agnostic from what we're seeing, and they are going for those small to mid-sized organizations that might have looser cybersecurity measures and more partnerships with an outside IT or MSP. And then one more thing I want to say too is what we've seen is a rise in what we call ransomware as a service, which generally has lowered the barrier, the entry point for threat actors. So you don't need to be as sophisticated, as I mentioned earlier, for these specific industries. You can join ransomware as a service, and it's almost like a pyramid scheme with an entire ecosystem. This person is the one that deploys the malware. This person is the one that is the access broker. They find the access and then sell it upwards. So it does make being a threat actor much more accessible.
Kirsten, you stole my favorite one. The ransomware as a service is definitely what we're seeing emerge, because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry for these cyber criminals. So think of how organizations use something like Salesforce or HubSpot. You have this resource you can go to help you enhance your business, increase productivity. Well, hackers do the same thing. And these very elite groups can write these code, this malware, and then distribute it for these low-level, entry-level hackers so they can accomplish more sophisticated attacks. But it actually goes one step further where, hey, if you're just getting started and we have this tool you're not quite sure how to use, reach out to our help desk. We're going to help you deploy that software. We're going to help you hack this group and infiltrate this organization so you can be successful. Because at the end of the day, some of the rules that they attribute to or that they run by or govern by is that if these folks who are leveraging their software that they're subscribing to, like literally a monthly subscription, you can pay them. If they have a successful attack, that main organization, that main criminal entity is going to get a percentage of that payout. So like Kristen mentioned, it's a pyramid scheme and that money just rolls downhill. So the more successful and widespread these attacks can be, even on the lower end of the spectrum, that's still dollars coming in at the end of the day.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think to add on that, and it kind of goes in terms of how we've seen this landscape change over the years, the threat actors with the ransomware service are also helpful to the victim. Way back when, there might be some email that was poorly translated with terrible grammar and you couldn't quite understand what you need to do to get your decryptor key. And now they have these chat bots where there might be someone with a mic and they look very professional responding back on how to wire money to the Bitcoin wallet, how to use the decryptor key. Because in some sense, if they're not helpful, then no one's going to pay.
Yeah, one of the screenshots we always use in a lot of our presentations, it alludes to just that, where it shows the red screen, skull and crossbones, that you've been hacked. Here's the 1-800 number to call if you don't have a crypto wallet, you don't know how to open one. Call us, we'll help walk you through that process so you can give us your money.
The customer service is fantastic.
Exactly.
The customer service is, well, we could all learn something, I suppose. So when this happens to a small company, how long does it take them to recover from this? And I know that's probably case by case, depending on what has happened. But can you give some ideas of like, if this type of attack has happened, it takes this long, thereabouts?
Yeah, there's Kirsten, you want to jump in here? Yeah, it's going to vary, right? Small, mid-sized businesses, it's going to depend. What security controls were in place? Were you able to catch the attack in advance of them, being able to deploy to, completion on their side? Or did they successfully, I'd like to use air quotes here, set the house on fire and they accomplished their goal? Because if it's a full encryption of data, you're fully locked out, your systems are inaccessible, okay, if you pay the ransom, now you're going to get the decryption key, but is all of your data unencrypted? Has any of it been corrupted? Is it still usable? How long is it going to take for a forensics team to come in to ensure that your systems are fully cleaned, validated, and you're able to restore in a clean state? Because there are horror stories where companies don't necessarily follow the right protocols. They just want to get back up and running as quick as possible. They cut corners. But that what ends up happening is, the bad guys come back and say, oh, hey, we're still in your systems. Cool, I'll just hack you again. Give me my money again. And it can spiral out of control. So on average, I think the industry standard is probably like 6 to 7 months, which does sound alarming, but in reality, that can be the case.
Yeah, and that can be fast. And like you said, it really depends. And so I'm on the phone a lot of times with cyber insurance policyholders, so the victims, and they want to get up and running because they want to minimize downtime. They have SLAs. You need to temper expectations. And so what I try to do is I explain that recovery time comes in phases. So you first have that immediate downtime phase where you're dead in the water, you're trying to get back up and running. Then you have your technical recovery phase. That's more the forensic investigation, hardening of the network, as Matthew mentioned, so that the threat actor doesn't come back, and then replacing the hardware in some cases. And then the final phase, which could be up to a year maybe, is what I call the financial and legal tail. Because if sensitive information was stolen in the cyber incident, there's the legal process of notifications, credit monitoring for consumers, potential regulatory notifications, and fines, depending on your industry or your state or the state where some of these victim consumers were. And then also the legal tail, because there might be third-party lawsuits or class actions or some sort of claims from a consumer whose information was compromised. And then finally, within that, and this takes a long time, is that trust lag. And that's where long-term clients either move or don't come back.
Yeah. So, I mean, every day our employees are doing small little things that end up sometimes leading to everything that you just said. So, which is so terrifying. But what are some of the things that you've seen that employees are doing, owners of the companies are doing, small things that we don't realize are kind of putting us at risk?
Oh man,
There's probably
I
so many.
So, you go first,
there's
Beth,
a
but there's so many.
Yeah, and we've had some cases where literally, so we're a managed security service provider. We're that division of Acrisure. So we have our hands in protecting our clients, providing those front end controls. So we see, when our clients come under attack, we're making sure they're protected and all of those good things. But we've had calls from our clients where the CEO or the executive team literally is requesting, can you turn off MFA? They just don't want to do this anymore. They're sick of it. And we have to politely explain, no, that is a major security risk, especially at the executive level and ownership level, because they are the most highly targeted folks at the organization. So no, we can't turn off MFA. We'll try to work with them to make it easier, but we can't do that. But also a common one, and then Kirsten, I'll hand it to you, but a very common one is just something like typical or common sense cyber hygiene. And that could be something like using different passwords for different resources, different applications, different bank logins. I recently spoke with a prospect where we're engaging with them, and their head of finance is someone who's a little younger, and dealing with a lot more money than they're used to. Only they came to find out that this employee is using one username, one password for every bank account, for every application. So when you think about the risk there, that means if any one of those providers or application, the SaaS cloud, whatever they're using, if any of those credentials are compromised, those hackers now have keys to the kingdom for everything this business does.
Yeah, and to even get those credentials, what we're seeing, and unfortunately, it's really the employee error. They're falling for these phishing emails. And way back when, it was more obvious than not what a phishing email was, and you can delete it or report it. But now AI has made these phishing emails just indistinguishable from what maybe your boss or the CEO would write. It even uses the same tone. So, and the AI phishing email might even convey a level of urgency. So we call that the social engineering trap. And that's where those employees, quickly give up their credentials or allow access or take action that was really for the benefit of the threat actor. And then I know I mentioned AI, and this is very, very, very specific, but we're seeing a lot of we're seeing claims that involve organizations where employees use what's called shadow AI. And that was a new concept to me. I know Matthew's much more technical, but a lot of employees might access their own AI that isn't licensed or sanctioned by the company, but that AI portal or product might not be secure. And you're essentially putting in contracts or company information or maybe PII that is the organization's to do your work, but then that information is now stored with that AI provider.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's a big risk for client or for companies who are trying to get into AI, right? It's the buzzword. It was the cloud, then it was Web3, now it's AI, and everyone's going that direction. But their employees don't fully understand the risks that are inherent there. And as Kirsten, as you're alluding to, if the employees aren't using a company approved, company sanctioned, company secured AI portal, or AI of their choosing, platform of their choosing, you are giving away company information. You are giving away client information. And there are tons of horror stories emerging right now where law firms, hospitals, even technology providers, they're giving away their secret sauce and private information, and they're just putting it into Chat GPT, putting it into Claude, and putting whatever prompts they're looking for, not realizing you're giving away that data. Now it is just out there. It is no longer secure in your systems because you willingly handed it over.
And then
Yeah,
you don't know
that's
if those systems are secure now that they have your data.
yeah, that's fascinating because there are so many companies that are pushing to use AI more, and they're trying to educate them on that, but then you don't even really think about the fact that, okay, it can make one thing better and one thing way worse. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, we're definitely
There's
seeing that
a
push, but without sort of the security measures around which to use it.
that is an emerging trend in the security space is locking down those platforms, right? So even if your employees accidentally or just willingly put in protected information, there are platforms that are designed to protect against those AI engines. So it can remove, it can distill, it can redact that sensitive content and details, still give the user the information they're looking for, or executing those prompts, but you're not compromising that sensitive material.
Sure.
When you join NRCA, you're getting access to exclusive training, legal support, technical resources, and strong advocacy in Washington, fighting for your business, your workers, your future. Join the crew. You belong here.
So, brass tacks, let's talk a little bit about how this has happened. Like examples of how this has happened. And maybe let's talk about things that would be common. People would be like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." And then other things that have happened that we would have no idea that, "Oh, it's gotten that sophisticated."
I'll jump in. And it's because I'm coming from the claim perspective. So when a cyber incident happens and there's cyber insurance involved, we get that call. And, specific to roofing, I was able to pull 3 examples. One, I'm handling right now a ransomware claim against a roofing company. And that was unfortunate because there was a signal that went off at 3 a.m. that something was suspicious. But the EDR tool, the endpoint detection response, didn't have anyone to monitor it. So even though it was working, there was no one to monitor the fact that someone was in the system. And then everyone got into work in the morning, and that's when they realized we're under attack, everything's encrypted, here's the note. And the threat actor demanded about $800K. I think that's about 10 Bitcoin, gave the wallet. And companies don't necessarily want to engage with criminals, but sometimes if you can't get that data back or you don't have viable backups, you have no choice but to pay. Or if you pay, it might minimize the overall downtime of business interruption. So you need to make that risk analysis, and that's where this company is right now. And then I have another one. We call it a business email compromise, a BEC. So through a phishing email, an employee at a roofing sheet and metal company gave up their credentials. The threat actor was able to be in the email system, sort of took a back seat and saw like where the transaction happened, where do people communicate, when can I intercept myself to redirect a payment. And the threat actor did that, redirected a payment that was supposed to go to a subcontractor to the fraudulent account, $30,000. And top of mind was that money. We got everyone involved. We called law enforcement, Secret Service, filed the IC3. But there's also this unknown exposure that wasn't top of mind that we really had to help this company understand. Like, we need to do a forensic investigation, and we can do it concurrently with trying to claw back the money, but we don't know what kind of information the threat actor might have exfiltrated, triggering notification obligations. And if you don't do that, and you did have to notify regulators or individuals, then you could be fined, and it could hit you, on the back end with a reputation loss or lost business. And then the final third one I'm handling right now is it's a newer one. We call it vishing. So voice. Well, I don't know if it was voice phishing, but we do know there was a BEC. But the threat actor was able to figure out by sitting back and watching transactions who the roofing company's banker was. And so then called the general office and said, "Oh, hey, I'm the banker. There is a suspicious transaction coming through, and I want to make sure it's legitimate." And so the office manager transferred the threat actor, thinking it was the banker, to the controller. But then the controller said, "Oh, this isn't. I'm not in charge of the banking relationship. Let me forward you to that person." And so because the controller transferred it and said, "Hey, fellow employee, I've got the bank on the line. Can you talk to them?" they thought it was legitimate. And the threat actor said, there's a $1.5 million transaction that's going to go through. Did you authorize that? And so, of course, they said, no, oh my gosh, not us. And there was that level of panic. And so the threat actor said, well, then let's stop it. I'm going to need your PIN. I'm going to need all this information. It was divulged, and then the money was gone.
It's terrifying.
It's scary how efficient these bad guys are. And Kirsten, you use the analogy that I love to use all the time, where I like to view, or I like to equate cyber criminals today like the antithesis to the bank robbers of the Wild West back in the day, where they're no longer kicking the doors down, guns blazing, take the money and run. Instead, when they're able to infiltrate and get inside an environment, they want to sit there, study, learn as much as they can. That way, when they do deploy their attack, it's as comprehensive as possible. It's as convincing as possible. And we have an incident where there was a large church renovation going on, and there was a quarterly payment of 6 figures that's going out to a specific vendor. A hacker impersonated or infiltrated the email, got to understand the cadence and the specific dollar amount that was being transferred. They posed as the bank, stepped in, and for 2 quarterly cycles, got those 6-figure payments rerouted to themselves before that third quarter came around. And then the vendors calling the church saying, hey, we haven't been paid in 6 months. What's going on? Suddenly realizing those dollars added up, and it turns into a, as Kirsten alluded to, large legal dispute, financial dispute, insurance dispute, because who's at fault here? Because money was willingly handed over. What we've also seen in the construction space, we have a large firm that we've engaged with. They acquire smaller organizations. And again, if bad guys are in the environment, they wait for an opportune time to strike. And they knew this smaller firm was about to be acquired by a much larger firm. So they deployed the ransom on the smaller firm to force the larger firm to pay them. So it was almost like, hey, we know this business is going down. You're about to sign paperwork. Why don't we take over them? And if you want this to go through on a timeline of your choosing, just give us the money that we're asking. And of course, the larger firm has no controls, no insight to what's happening, and they're forced to pay at the end of the day. And then one last story. It's one that isn't necessarily pertaining to roofing or construction, but it's one that I love to talk through during presentations because it shows how these situations spiral. And it goes back to the MGM breach in Las Vegas from about 2 years ago now, where at the end of the day, it was north of $900 million that it ended up costing MGM, I think almost $1 billion in lost revenue, legal fees, reconstruction, forensics, all of that. But how that attack started was a LinkedIn search and a phone call to IT support. The hackers just identified a person that they believed would have high enough credentials within the MGM org. They posed as that individual calling the help desk, needing to reset their MFA, and went back and forth with them, but convinced them finally to reset multi-factor for them, which essentially is just handing them the keys to the car. Now they waltzed right in the back door, created profiles, identities for their buddies to log in validly, and they just took over everything. So these attacks can be sophisticated at the end of the day, but they can start very simply at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always it. It's an email, it's a phone call, it's a link, things that you see every day that you're watching every day, you're responding to every day, and sometimes we're going so quickly through things, we don't take the time to clock it, right? So, what are some of the things that you would say, and I get this is also a robust list of what I'm asking, but what are some of the things that companies should really focus on, steps that they should take to mitigate their risk when it comes to some of these things?
Yeah, I think this is a Matthew question, but I do want to start by saying you have to create a culture where it's not punitive. So if you see something, you can say something without getting in trouble or berated, or if you did something, you are encouraged to speak up right away. And I think there are some cultures where it's not like that, and so you don't have a lot of collaboration among employees to report. And I do think employees they're on the front line, like they're your best protector. And then after that, I think Matthew will have the more technical areas to help secure the systems.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic place to start because it is the culture of the organization at hand. Because at the end of the day, you can have every security control, every tool in place possible, but at the end of the day, the weakest link is us. We human beings are the weak link in the security chain. So things as simple as education, making the employees aware of situations they can encounter, or if you come across something very similar to this, or emails or text messages with certain types of requests or levels of urgency, here's where you need to pump the brakes, view this as a yellow flag, red flag, maybe escalate that, ask the appropriate people internally, what should I do here? Is this legitimate? Don't be afraid to do that. But additionally, what we encourage from the cybersecurity perspective is the philosophy of defense in depth and security in layers. Because there's never going to be one security tool, whether it's hardware or software, that's going to be the silver bullet and it's going to do everything. Rather, my very cheesy analogy is security tools can be viewed like layers of Swiss cheese. If you hold up a single slice, it's got holes in it. You can see right through it. But each of those slices does something specific. So if you start layering those different slices on top of one another, you eventually get a solid block of cheese, meaning if a bad guy is able to circumvent one tool on the perimeter, maybe they can use a vulnerability to get in through a back door. You have other tools in place that are going to trip them up, that are going to catch them in the act, rather than them just being able to successfully walk into your organization, walk into your network, and just roam around freely until they're ready to, bring the business down.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I do like that cheese analogy. I think that helps us see
It
see
is
that
cheesy.
there. Yeah, it's cheesy, but it works. It works. Yeah, because I think, people that don't work in this every day like the two of you do, they can think of it very black and white. It's just like you either have protection or you don't, as if it's just a simple push of a button, but there's so many different things that go into that. Um, can you speak a Go ahead.
I was going to say, just the fear too, when it comes to the construction space, the roofing space, security is kind of viewed as a nuisance almost, whereas it's not an expense on the bottom line on your budget that you're buying a new piece of hardware, you're buying a new truck, new equipment, safety gear, whatever it is. It's not something tangible that the ownership can see what they're getting for that spend. Rather, it's this invisible software that's just running in the background. And ideally, it's protecting that organization from those hidden threats. But sometimes it's hard to conceptualize for folks who are, as you said, are not in this line of work, who don't deal with IT. They're dealing with hammers and nails, not ones and zeros. So our goal here was we always try to make the information accessible to those executive teams, because at the end of the day, if they are willing to spend on security, our philosophy is let's show you what you're getting. Let's show you your ROI, how many attacks we mitigate, how much defense we've provided that you've been able to perform business as usual for the past 3 months. But on our quarterly business review, we'll show you here's what has happened behind the scenes that we stepped in to stop. You just didn't notice it because we're doing our jobs.
Yeah,
Exactly. And I think, and
absolutely.
it's we like to do on our side is when we see that maybe a ransomware attack was mitigated, we would compare it like this actually happened to this organization and this is what they had to do and this is what it cost them. You didn't have to do this because XYZ or for whatever reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the question I was gonna ask you about was insurance, like cyber security insurance, but also all of this, just the idea of thinking of it like health insurance. Like we have health insurance just in case something happens to take care of us or whatever. This is similar. It's like we don't want to believe that an attack is going to happen, but you have to put the measures in place in case it does. So speak a little bit to like insurance policies that cover these types of things. Obviously, that's probably also somewhere where you can get sold down the river a little bit if you're not careful, but you probably need to have that. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I can start. That is what I do. I handle claims under cyber insurance policies. Let me preface by saying a standalone cyber insurance policy is relatively new in the history of insurance. There's not a lot of actual data. It's hard to price. The market is cyclical. And so what I've noticed is cyber insurance policies really are great at value-added proactive services. So instead of being a financial reimbursement instrument, they truly are a partner with you and then your cybersecurity measures. They'll offer up a managed EDR, MDR. So there's actually someone 24/7 monitoring that beacon if it goes off. They will provide for free roundtable top exercises to test your incident response plan. I can tell you a lot of organizations will say, oh, we don't have one. And then the carriers will help put together one. It's going to be different for every organization, but there are certain starting points. And from our experience, those organizations that do a tabletop exercise are in the best position to prevent or mitigate the exposure of a cyber attack. And then when an attack does happen, the great thing about cyber insurance is that's what it covers. It'll pay the ransom. It'll help you negotiate. It'll run the OFAC check if you are going to pay the ransom. It'll cover your business interruption expenses, your reputational harm expenses, your notification expenses, third-party claims arising from those notifications. And I think one of the most important aspects of standalone cyber insurance policies is they offer up a panel of vetted, tested, experienced vendors. And so off the bat, you call your cyber insurance carrier, they will put you in touch with privacy counsel. They call them a breach coach. And then from there, the breach coach will retain a forensic investigator so that it's done under the guise of privilege. So like Matthew said, if you don't do the investigation correctly, it could get messed up pretty bad. And especially if it's not done under privilege, because you're investigating in anticipation of litigation. And if you were just wildly negligent, you don't want a consumer that was affected to get a hold of that report. And so you have, as a cyber insurance policy holder, you have access to these vendors at pre-negotiated rates as well. And I can say, just working with them over 15 years, they are fantastic.
Yeah, that's really awesome.
And if I could ask a question real quick of Kirsten on the topic of insurance, because a lot of organizations, and we are, as I mentioned, the security arm of Acrisure, but we still deal with cyber policies on our insurance arm. So Kirsten, one thing that we always see folks get tripped up on or kind of confused on is that the first party versus third party coverage. So if you wouldn't mind, give the folks a little background and detail there, because I think that could be very beneficial for people to understand.
Yeah, that's a good point. So cyber insurance policies aren't necessarily liability policies, meaning for claims arising against you because of your negligence, like a D&O or an EPL policy. If you are injured because of the intrusion, because of the incident, you have damage, you have corrupt data, you have to pay the ransom. That's what we call first party loss. And so that is something that is paid on behalf of the insured, the victim. But the policy then, it's modular. Policies are very modular. There's different first party coverages and then third party coverages. The liability piece. So like I was saying, you have the breach coach helping with the forensic investigation. The larger the organization, the more likely there will be a third party claim. There are just too many opportunists out there. And so then there'd be the liability piece where if a claim arises out of that first party incident, it'll be covered by cyber insurance. It's sort of all one event. And so to answer your question, concisely, Matthew, is the policies are modular for first party and then third party, but they are all one holistic policy and they share one aggregate limit generally.
Yeah, we just see folks that get tripped up sometimes because they'll inquire, I just had X, Y, or Z happen. If they don't have a robust enough policy in place, it's like, all right, well, does this fall into first or third party coverage? Is that covered in your policy? And sometimes they just get left hanging because they didn't spring for the more robust plan.
Yeah, and then also some policyholders might not know that they have what's called first party coverage. There will be an incident, they'll handle it themselves, and then down the road, there's a third party claim arising out of it, and we'll get notice of it, and we'll say, well, there's a claim, but what happened? Where was the incident? And then they'll say, oh, we didn't tell you because we didn't think we had coverage, we handled it ourselves. And that is such an unfortunate situation, because going back to the vendors and the speed and efficiency at which these vendors can handle an investigation, it would have put the insured in a much better position.
Sure. Yeah. So much information, guys. This is so great. Um, so what if you like wrapping it up? What is one piece of advice that you would give to a roofing contractor, a roofing company, something like that? Like if they need to focus on this and they have questions about it, like what is a piece of advice that you would give them? Where should they start?
I would say first map out who your vendors and subs are so you know how you're all connected. If there is connectivity within that surface, the tech surface, and what the contracts say. Some contracts will require you to carry cyber insurance, or if you're working with a vendor, you might need to require that they carry cyber insurance. And so you'll want to understand what, from the insurance perspective, what are your obligations for insurance first, so you know who's covered and where the risk can get transferred.
Yeah.
Similar to the insurance side, where every year you're revisiting that renewal and the policy at hand, what's the business profile looking like for this year? That's an exercise businesses do just naturally. That's just inherent to insurance, whether it's cyber or just P&C, whatever it may be. You're going to go through that exercise. From the IT security perspective, when was the last time, for a roofing company, construction company, whomever, when was the last time you sat down with your IT or your third-party service provider and had that same conversation? When did you last evaluate the technology that's in use today? Because I can't tell you how many times I've had an introduction call, walk through their current security profile, and they're using homegrown products or homegrown technologies or security tools you can get at Best Buy. And I'm sitting here saying, well, you're a multi-million-dollar business and you're literally trusting something I can go buy off the shelf for $20. That's not a security plan. You should have that honest conversation with your provider or internal IT staff to get that understanding that if we had a cyber attack today, whether it's a business email compromise and someone clicks a link they shouldn't, are our computers protected? Is the technology going to stop it? Can you prove that to me? Or if we actually have a ransomware attempt and someone tries to breach our network, we have a DDoS attack, we have a brute force attempt, someone's coming after our legacy software that we can't patch and upgrade. Are those systems truly protected? Can you prove it to me? Because a lot of times, again, we have insight not only from the security side here, but also the insurance side, where we have insureds who go through this process of becoming victims. But I can guarantee you, if you ask their IT guy the day before, they would say, nope, we're protected. I got this covered. We're totally fine. So when was the last time you had that honest conversation with them on how truly protected are you?
Yeah, those are really good points. It's so similar to we've talked about this on other episodes, on the safety episode, on the mental health episode, where like the more you practice what you need to do just in case, the better you are at it. So it's the same thing with this. Your company needs to know these are all the things that we need to do in case this ever happens. So it's just second nature and you can protect yourself quickly.
Yeah, an analogy that comes to mind is, in the construction space, if you've got someone on a job site, you ask them a question, they say, no, this is going to be perfect. I guarantee it 100%. Are you really going to believe that person until you get some proof to that claim? Same thing on security. If someone's telling you, nope, you're 100% protected, you have no risks, no exposures, that's an immediate red flag for me saying, all right, there's definitely some ghosts in the walls here. It's just going to take a few more questions to find them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, is there anything that I didn't ask that you'd like to say about this topic? No. Okay.
You did a great job with the questions. You covered
Okay.
quite a bit of ground.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this episode today. And we hope that for all the listeners that this gave you some information about how you can protect your company from cybercrimes, interruptions that you may have, or the online exposure that your company could be facing. So thanks so much for joining me. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Kirsten. And we hope to see you next time.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure.
This podcast is produced by Told You So Media.
Told you so!